earlier in the interview, I teased that we were going to talk the training pipeline and how that has evolved. And I really wanted to save that kind of for the end part of the interview. Can walk us through what it was like maybe back when you were going through it, what it's like more now, and what motivated those changes?
Yeah, it's a great question. I have a pretty unique perspective. So I came in at a time when they had just changed the CCT pipeline. So combat control and pararescue at up to this point had gone through two separate pipelines, but they were working together in the units and they needed all the same capabilities. So the leadership at the time said, we're going to bring the pipelines together. My class, Dan Schilling's class, was the first class where combat controllers went through the pararescue indoctrination course, which is where you basically weed everybody out in the first 10 weeks. And anybody who makes it through there has a 99% chance of making it. So I was at an inflection point in training where we were doing something new. We called ourselves the first of the new breed. That training went on from September 87 all the way through December of 99. So flipping into 2000, if you will. I'm sorry, December of 2000, flipping into 2001. So that's how the pipeline was. You would go through this 10-week course. That's where they would attrit, 85 to 90% of the people. And if you made it through there, you were pretty much guaranteed to make it through jump school and free fall school and scuba school and combat control school and pararescue school and air traffic control and all those other courses that you went through. Fast forward to 1999, 2000, I'm an instructor and we're graduating 24 students a year. The career field is losing 34 people a year. So we're going negative and we're already only 73% manned. So our ranking officer, a guy named Jeff, awesome officer, awesome leader. He was prior enlisted Vietnam era guy and became an officer. He said, we got to do something different. So what we're going to do is we're going to build the training where the standards at the end are the same, but we're training people up front and trying to build slowly as opposed to in 10 weeks, eliminate all the people that maybe shouldn't make it. Maybe some of those people that couldn't make the 10-week course, you can build over an 18-month time period. And we did that. And, you see post 9/11, a lot of those dudes are really good dudes. And that's how the training was. And even now that the training is evolving. So fundamentally now the way it works is you graduate basic training, you go to this thing called a prep course where they give you 4 to 6 weeks of teaching you how to PT and how to engage in the pipeline. What's expected of you? A push-up is a push-up no matter where you go, as opposed to one standard of a push-up here and another standard of a push-up there. And you learn all the stuff that you also learn nutrition, you learn how to work out properly and do fitness very well. And they measure all kinds of things on you physically, but they're also evaluating you emotionally and intellectually. I would say the pipeline now is probably harder than I went through because of all the things they measure. I tell people all the time, like, I might not make it through the current pipeline. They might look at me and go, yeah, you might physically make it, but you're a jackass. You're not the kind of guy we want. And even when I went through physically, the night before our class started, they brought us all into a room and the instructors told all these stories. And one instructor said, we want all of you guys to graduate. But based on my experience, 5 dudes in this room will graduate. And he looked at me and goes, Lamonica, you're not one of them. And you'd have thought he cast a voodoo spell on me. Most of the students in my class wouldn't talk to me after that. My point is that the attrition all happened up front. Now we're building skills into the guys and we're measuring a lot of things that allow us to look at them and go, okay, are they physically, can they make it, but they're also going to be a good operator. The schools they go through are all the same, right? They go through an assessment and selection. They go through pre-scuba, which is difficult. They go through scuba, which is difficult. Combat control school is also very difficult. All the other ones aren't as hard. Where the washout happens is assessment and selection, pre-scuba, scuba, and combat control school. Between those 4 courses, right now, we lose 91% of people. And I say that very accurately because I was just down at the assessment selection course 3 weeks ago doing an immersion day event with some donors. And the instructors, provided that piece of data. He said, hey, like it's right now, it's 91% don't make it. We're trying to figure out how to fix that, but you can only deal with the population that you're given to deal with, right? And today's population is different than the population when you and I were growing up. One of the things that he said to me, it was really interesting. He said, the one metric that we can look at that helps us understand whether a person's going to make it, this is odd, is have they ever been in a fist fight? If you've not been in a fist fight, your probability of making it are pretty low, which is really interesting. Like, I don't even know why they asked that question, but he said it is something that is consistent across the board.
Let me ask, why do you think guys who have been in fist fights are more likely to make it as to where people who have not been punched in the face are not?
I would offer, it goes back to the old axiom of, it's not, how hard you get hit, it's whether you get back up, right? And by all standards, I should not have made it through the pipeline. Like the instructor who called me out, he was absolutely right. I was 148 pounds. At the time, I was smoking cigarettes. I played baseball. I wasn't really an athlete. But I wasn't going to quit. Like, they were going to have to kill me. I was ready to pass out and die in the pool before I was going to quit. And I happened to be in enough shape to meet the standards each week. And I've always found that that's the type of guy who makes it. Every now and again, we get a kid who's pretty wealthy and pretty intelligent and could have gone to Stanford, but he chooses to do this anyway. A lot of times those guys don't make it because the second they have a day that's hard, and everybody has those days, they're like, man, this is too much for me. Every day was hard for me. I didn't know what an easy day looked like. But I don't care who you are. If you're a collegiate swimmer, you're a collegiate runner, you're a football player, the cadre and the standards are going to find your weakness, and that weakness is going to hammer you every single day. And I think people who navigate difficulties in life are probably better postured to deal with that type of training.
I would agree with you. I think logically your assessment is spot on. When it comes to that extra year of training you do if you are trying to go to the 24th STS, is it just similar training but just more detailed and driven harder, or is it a totally different ball game?
So it's a couple things, right? It's they take you back into a more rigid posture. So you graduate the pipeline, you get to a squadron and you're on a team, and you start learning freedoms, right? And there's a lot more latitude. But when you get assessed for the tier 1 unit, you go back into a training mode. You are being looked at every day. There is a physical aspect to it, but they get the benefit of knowing what you endured through the pipeline. So when they lay down expectations for you, they know you can make it and you know you can make it. You just got to get back into that mode. But intellectually, you are challenged every single day. And for a combat controller, that is working in a 4-dimensional space, right? You got the 3 dimensions of the X, Y, and Z axis, but then you've got the radio, which is a whole other thing. And you're listening to, in one ear, guys on the ground, and in another ear, you listen to aircraft, and you're going to have to flip channels because you're going from one aircraft to another. So you're always managing chaos, if you will. So they take your skills that you already have and they push you to a PhD level, really is what it is. That's the difficulty. Physically, it was hard, but intellectually, it was a lot harder.
How good? So one of the CCTs that I spoke to, he never went to the 24th STS, but he talked about how when he went through the training, he was attached to an ODA over in Afghanistan. Yep. He felt like every CCT in his class felt like they really had to prove themselves in all aspects because they knew that they were going to be around guys who were really good at CQB, all these other skills. And it's like, you don't want to be the weak link in the chain. You want to be, if anything, the strongest link in the chain. Did you kind of view it the same way or not so much?
Absolutely. It's one of the challenges of the job. So first off, I'll tell you, we don't do it doctrinally, but we do it habitually. It's how we train our guys going through the pipeline. We're always talking to them about when you get to the unit, to whatever unit you go to, the hardest thing you're going to do is being a single guy attached to another organization, whether it's Army SF, Navy SEALs, one of the tier 1 units, coalition unit, right? You could be out there with the New Zealanders in Afghanistan. You can't be the weak link. Your radio has to work. You have to know how to bring power to bear. You physically have to be able to present yourself because it's the first thing people see about you. You're carrying the heaviest backpack because you've got all the radios and batteries, plus the team equipment. You cannot be the guy who holds everybody up. So that's how we train ourselves. It becomes real when you get to the unit. So I'll tell you, when I was later in my career, I was the chief of the unit, which means I was a senior enlisted guy. We had some congressmen come in, and we were walking them through all the things we do. And one of the congressmen said, "Well, what's the most difficult part of your job?" I said, "Here's the most difficult part of my job. I take a guy out of the pipeline. He's 20 years old. He's a baseline combat controller. I spend the next 6 months getting him his JTAC upgrade, which allows him to drop bombs on bad guys. It's his certification to kill bad guys. And then I send him to war. So 6 months and 1 day, he's in Afghanistan. That day, he meets his SFODA. That's the day he meets those guys. They don't know his name. All they know he's an Air Force guy. Within 4 hours, he can be in a firefight. And he's got to be able to prove himself on the battlefield with a young officer who's probably yelling in his ear, 'My guys are getting shot. You need to fucking fix this now.' And he's the lowest ranking guy. Nobody knows his name. He's an Air Force guy. That's the hardest part of being a combat controller. I didn't feel comfortable being that guy until I was at my 16-year mark of my career. At 16 years, I went, I can be with anybody and do anything a combat controller has to do and not feel under the gun. It took me 16 years to get there. No SEAL, no SF guy, no Ranger has to deal with that. They go to their team, they work with their team, and they're a number 2 guy until the number 1 guy leaves, or they're trained up enough to be the number 1 guy. Our guys don't get that benefit. You're always proving yourself every single time.
And that is, and I can only imagine the stress and just the pressure to perform. We're going to get into